Hi, my name is Mike Glenn, and I am the president of the Engaged Church Network, and we love working with pastors and churches in the Middle Tennessee area. And this is our video blog, our video conversation called Coffee with Mike. Kind of a catchy title there to get things rolling. We're glad you have joined us. My guest today is one of my favorite people, Amy-Jo Girardier.
That's it.
I have to work real hard on that last name, so you couldn't marry a guy named Smith or something like
Morgan,
that.
But Girardier just has that flair.
So took me about 3 years to learn how to spell it.
Me too.
With that. Amy-Jo has been on the staff at Brentwood Baptist Church for 15 years. 21 years.
Who knew?
You were 12 when you started, yeah.
I was 12.
And with that. So one of the great privileges I have had has been watching AJ grow in her ministry and in her grabbing hold of her gifts, being able to tell her, hey, you're good at this, you need to step into this. She started here with middle school girls and served throughout our student ministry for a long time, and now is in the ministry of women.
That's right.
With that.
Yeah,
so, and we're tellers because all the girls she had in middle school are now grown, and so you've got to.
They just followed.
I
followed them.
You follow them right on up. You may not know this, but AJ has been my teacher for a long time, and one of the things that she started holding me accountable for was ignoring half of my congregation. Now, if you know anything about me, you know I love to preach. You know I take my preaching very seriously. I work really hard on it. And so the way I really got to know her was she would show up in my office on Monday morning, sipping a cup of coffee and go, what were you thinking? Do you know how half your congregation heard that? And so what it means to understand that on any given Sunday, half of your congregation are women.
Right.
And think differently and are dealing with problems in different ways and that kind of stuff. And so what are the kind of things that a preacher needs to understand about what's happening? And let's just take it from the time the women walk in to the into the sanctuary. They're coming in. They may or may not have put kids in Sunday school or preschool. They're coming in, and then the worship starts. Tell me about that process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know from me personally, a lot of times getting into the sanctuary, there's all sorts of things. Like I have to prepare my heart a little bit differently because I'm thinking either I've just had a meltdown or not. Maybe I've had a meltdown, or maybe it's been my child who is having a meltdown, who's just screamed down the hallway, I hate church, right?
Right.
And so you can't
just help when you work at it.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm like, who's this kid, you know? But you can't just turn that off. I can't just turn that off. And I think that women have so many different, if you think of like a kitchen, they have so many different cabinets open at one time. And so it's really hard to focus in on one thing. And so as you walk into worship, you're carrying all of that with you. And so oftentimes I just have to breathe for a second. And I have to try to focus on shutting down my cabinet doors, you know?
Right.
And maybe that illustration is very specific to women because I'm thinking of a kitchen. But, I'm thinking about relationships. I'm thinking about, usually I'm beating myself up, really. And I think women tend to do that, you know, that they're thinking of all the things they didn't do and kind of going through a checklist of those relationships and maybe wounds. It's a lot, you know?
Yeah.
So... Does that happen for men?
Yeah, but a different kind of thing. They're different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, and you've heard us start a worship service going, we don't assume just because you're here.
Right.
That you're here.
It takes a minute to get
It takes a minute. So we want to give you these few minutes before we start our worship.
Yeah.
To deal with whatever you need to deal with, write whatever notes you need to write.
That would be that is so helpful for me when we do that. Our prayer times have been really important to sit for a second and just, have I talked to Jesus this morning? What did it look like? So I think those are important moments for women in particular. So, what other, is it just things you want me to talk about, just things that they're walking through with their hearts?
Yeah, well, you know, excuse me, when you and I first started having this conversation, it was things like all of your stories.
Yes.
have male heroes.
Right.
Which is what I grew up with. It's what I read. I read a lot of history. I read a lot of biographies. I read a lot of military history. So my first question to you was, where do I even find these stories?
Right, right.
So I can tell a story of a woman being a hero that half my congregation would then identify with.
Yeah. Well, and so thinking through stereotypes, of
Right.
course, like when I was hearing sermons or any conversation in the church, if it's always football, if that's the icebreaker,
Right.
then I'm like, well, I'm out.
Yeah, pick your team, and we'll go from there.
So I can joke around with it, but I don't know. I don't connect with football. So yeah, thinking through your icebreaker question or your entry question, what does that look like? How are you bringing in everybody? I had talked about like this, the stories in the Bible that actually contain women.
Right.
How often do we get to hear the story of Ruth? I was so thankful, and several women were, when we went through the book of Ruth in a worship service. But if I'm not mistaken, that was something that the Jewish community, they went through the book of Ruth and Esther.
Right.
They're associated with the feasts, right? So they were regularly, Jesus would have regularly been hearing about women in the Torah or in the Hebrew scriptures. And so do we do that? Like how often are stories told about women? And then when they are being told, are they being told with a slant? For example, Bathsheba. Does she always hold is she always being told with the lens of a seducer, or Eve? Is she always being preached like a lens of...
Yeah, everything in the world's her fault.
Yes. But so those are, when I'm hearing the stories of women in the Bible, I'm like, oh, good, they're being talked about. And I'm like, oh, is that what you think about me?
Right.
Women at the tomb. I'm so excited on Easter morning that we usually get to hear about women at the tomb. Do we talk about them as gossipers? Well, that's why God put them down there, because they're the ones that got to run with the story.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, but
Well, see, two of my female heroes are Shiphrah and Puah,
right,
the midwives,
yes,
who are celebrated in Jewish lore on par with Moses.
Yeah.
Because they defied Pharaoh, but they didn't need a burning bush.
That's right. That's
They just took Pharaoh on.
Yeah.
And because of that, Moses was able to be born.
Right.
And they have become pastoral models for me.
Yeah.
And
I think I heard you preach about them. You were the first person I ever heard preach about them. And I love that.
Yeah.
So
they created a safe place for the dream to be born and wouldn't let a pagan king define the future of God's people.
Yeah. I haven't heard a sermon about the women who, right as they're going into the promised land, they're the daughters of, and I can't say the name, like it's a really hard name to say, but the father had passed away.
Right.
And they go to Moses, and right outside of the tent a meeting, they take their argument to Yahweh and say, do we get land?
Right.
And and essentially,
Well, we're part of the promise. Yeah.
right. That's a powerful story. But anyway, those stories of in the Bible are huge. I think also when we talk about women, are we assigning different stereotypes for them, gender stereotypes, like all women cook, or all women like to shop, or all women drive.
Well, you don't do that because you are a tech nerd.
That's right. I do curbside delivery. That's what I do.
So one of the funniest conversations I had with your husband was when he told me your love language was technology.
That's right. That's right. Every time I get a gift, it's like a robot.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, I bought I saved up money from a gift to get sous vide. It's a cookie robot, right? So I'm like, this is great. I can put it in 24 hours and it'll be ready. So technology is my love language, not cooking. But those gender stereotypes I think they're destructive.
Making assumptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Making assumptions.
Yeah. Now, one of the conversations we had, and it always was painful when you would come in and you were doing it intentionally, and you would say, do you know how your girls your girls. And I have been here long enough that I have lots of adopted daughters.
Right.
And I love them dearly. And are you aware of how your girls heard what you said as far as body image and all of the issues and some of the stories we have about what young women are going through in our culture? It's just heartbreaking.
Right.
So how, as a pastor, and you know, most pastors are good guys. They don't want to do any, but we just stumble into it.
Right.
And we create a wall that we don't even know we're doing.
Right.
And I was so grateful for you telling me that, as brutal as you were. But help me understand, or help those who are listening, what our young girls are dealing with, and how I need to be mindful of my language.
Yeah, those are great questions. Three areas that I think dealing with girls, and I always think women are dealing with these too, but we talk about identity, significance, and purpose. Right. So
which are gospel issues, bedrock gospel issues.
Right. But for a girl and also for a woman, but girls in particular, they want to know. So the question that's associated with identity for them is, what does God say about me? They put in rules, and I don't know how men respond to this, but I know that we as girls and women do this. In particular, they're saying, what does God think about me as a daughter? What does the Bible say? What does God think about me as a mom, as a wife, as a girlfriend? You know, like they're trying to figure those things out. TikTok is saying a lot about those different things. And if the church isn't saying it, then they're going and they're getting 24/7 sermons from Taylor Swift. They're listening to her songs. I'm not saying that Taylor Swift is, a horrible person. I think she's got great music and I listen to her music, but those words are preaching a sermon to her girls. If you listen and they listen over and over and over again, and then they come to church and they're not hearing the church say anything, it's really missing words.
Then we have defaulted. They have defaulted to that message.
So my identity, what those roles, what does God say about that? And then obviously we have to speak into, what does your identity look like as Christ says that your identity in Christ, obviously. What does that look like for you as a girl? Then significance. This one is huge because really the question is, if I wasn't here, would anybody miss me? Am I valuable? So when somebody from the platform says, you belong here, you matter, but then they never hear about themselves in a sermon or anything, that speaks more volume than oftentimes hearing the word you belong, you matter, right? And then the last thing is purpose. What's my purpose? And so girls are trying to figure that out. Women are trying to figure that out. What is my purpose? So they may...
And the worst thing is to say, you can do anything you want to do.
Until you age out of student ministry. Now what are you supposed to do as a woman in the church? But you're right. You can do anything you want.
Yeah. So what does it mean?
That's right.
We don't talk about gifts and...
One of the most powerful things for me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but this was a marker on my life, was when I was in 6th grade. And so middle school girls are so important to me because I know how important that stage is. But Rick Hieronymus, we have weird names in Illinois, but Rick Hieronymus was his name, and we had started a church plant. And we were going through the purpose-driven church. It was brand new at the time, so that's how old I am. But anyway, we're walking through as a church, and Rick and the whole group, I'm sitting on the floor, super shy, and he calls my name out, and he goes, Amy-Jo, what do you think our church should do with this? And I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, other than being recognized.
I do remember that he listened, and he essentially was saying, I have a voice in the church. And so Gen Z and Gen Alpha, or girls in particular, are looking for, do I have a voice in the church? Do I have a purpose in the church? Or are they going to wait to hear me until I'm such and such, old? Yeah. So, those are key things for sure.
Okay. So I'm a new pastor. Yeah. Starting my church. And I want to preach well. What are the kind of things I can do to make sure that I'm intentional about bringing in that other half of the congregation?
Okay, well, the very first thing, and I share this and I give you credit, but you taught me this actually, and you probably don't even know it. I've been talking about you and never told you this, but I heard you say that you were trying to figure out, I may say this wrong, but you were trying to, this is how I've been telling it. So if I say it wrong.
Yeah. It happened that way or should have.
That's right. But you were trying to figure out how to pray for Jeannie.
Yeah.
And you asked God to help you know, because you said God created Jeannie and he knows her better than
anybody.
Yeah. And so I would say that to pastors. God made the people in your church.
Right.
God loves people, right? God made men, God made women. It says it in Genesis, and he loves them.
And there's something unique about that, the feminine character.
Yeah.
That expresses the love of God.
That's right.
In a way that just the masculine cannot.
Yeah, that's right.
It is the totality of that experience.
Yeah. So you taught me that. I wrote down, pray for women before you preach to women.
Ooh.
You know, and then
I need that on a slogan. Yeah.
Pray for people before you preach for people. I know that you have modeled that. And so, it would be arrogant for me to go in front of a group of men to talk with them and try to assume that I know, but God knows. God knows women and knows their hearts, and he's going to guide you through the passages, right? To know how to talk with them. So that's the first thing. The other thing is what you've done as well. You've modeled bringing women alongside. I always felt like I had a place at the table to be able to say, you would, I didn't approach that. Maybe I did sometimes. Maybe I was a little bit mouthy earlier on, but you were so kind to be able to say, "What do you think about that?"
Yeah.
Doing the same thing Rick Hieronymus did.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, what you have such a keen insight and awareness that it would be foolish of me,
Right.
not to take advantage of that.
Yeah. But Carla and Worley, you brought people in to humbly look at.
Yeah.
Okay, what?
Carla came in and was worked with me in research for a long time.
Right.
And the first thing she did was subscribe to O Magazine.
Yeah.
And I was telling her, I can't. I'm not going to subscribe.
We're not doing this. Yeah.
Her words was, "This is the high priestess of your women."
That's right.
Because at that time, everybody, every female in America was paying attention to her.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were talking about who that would be now.
Right.
And right now it's Taylor Swift. You know,
yeah.
Her music is shaping a generation of women. I did just hear this report in American Bible Society, and this has a point tying it back to Taylor, that 63% of Americans say that their faith was shaped by their moms when they were 10.
Well, mine was.
Yeah, mine too. So for good or bad, right? Yeah. Ours was shaped in a positive influence. But think about that. It's so important to know who are shaping the women who are going to be shaping the generations to come. So if this generation right now is being shaped by Taylor Swift, how is that going to impact, right? So how do we make sure that we are helping to understand what they're hearing culturally and making sure that we're helping to shape their faith from the pulpit too, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's really important to look at people like Oprah or
and not that you have to believe everything, but you do have to understand what's in the conversation.
Yeah, listen to a Taylor Swift song if you haven't, and then
do I have to?
I know, right? Maybe you can do the
I grew up in Southern rock. I gotta have a discreet. Well, I've listened to your songs.
I've listened to your songs. For like how long? There was like an intro.
Atlanta, yeah.
It was so long, right? Yeah. Daryl and I were like, oh my goodness. So you gotta listen to Taylor Swift. Not to enjoy it, just to hear it.
Just to understand the conversation.
Exactly.
That's going on out there.
Yeah. So culturally listen, bring people to the table, pray for women. What else did I have? This may sound silly, but I was thinking, remember that the same, like if they're Christ followers, sometimes it's intimidating, but remember that the same spirit or the same Christ that's at work within you is at work within them. And I think that's important to remember that it's not men and women, but like
it's Christ followers.
Christ followers.
In Christ Jesus, there is neither male nor female.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what would that do if we're looking at our congregations that way? I think that's unifying and important. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're giving me a ton to think about.
There it is.
I hope we have given you a lot to think about as well. Now let's celebrate you a little bit. Your new book.
Yes. So I have a new book that came out in January for teen girls, and then I have a new book today that's a bunch of authors together put together a resource called Alive. That is a guide to help women grow in their relationship with the Lord. And it's a 5-week Bible study. I'm really excited about it because it kind of helps women answer the question of what's next after they become Christians. So
this is Amy-Jo Girardier. She's one of my heroes, one of my favorite people. I'm glad you got to join us. I'm Mike Glenn. This is Coffee with Mike from the Engaged Church Network, and we'll see you next time.